Hello everyone, and thank you for watching this overview of the CORES certification. My name is Mina Nutbeam, and I am the Program Manager for the CORES program. I'm excited to walk you through what CORES is, why it matters, and how your organization can apply for the certification. What is CORES? So CORES stands for Certified Organization for Resident Engagement and Services. It's a 5-year organizational certification that recognizes housing providers and third-party service partners who've built strong systems for resident services coordination. CORES isn't only a certification, but a signal to funders, investors, and partners that your organization is committed to quality, resident-centered services. So why does CORES exist? SAFE launched CORES with 4 key goals. 1, to create a shared language and set of standards for resident services. 2, to help organizations strengthen their systems and communicate those structures to stakeholders, including practitioners, policymakers, and investors. 3, attract stable funding for resident services coordination. And 4, show the measurable impact of affordable housing paired with services. In short, CORES is about reflecting a robust standard for resident-informed and data-driven services. So what do we mean by a system of resident services coordination? Resident services coordination isn't just about having a coordinator on site, although this is critically important to success. It's an entire system that includes staffing, training, partnerships, data collection, technology, and sustainable funding. A system of resident services coordination includes all the functions tied to the mission of providing resident services in affordable housing. CORES looks at all these pieces together to ensure services are scalable and impactful. This is the framework that CORES was built off of. This framework was informed by feedback from practitioners in the field of resident services who had a robust commitment to these services and a history of experience providing them. Our framework is resident-centered and data-driven, and it helps organizations make informed decisions about when and where to provide services. This process is collaborative between corporate or organizational and property teams and between staff and residents. It's not linear, it's iterative and interactive. This is really a simplified representation of these collaborations. The full framework and guidelines for a system of resident services coordination is available in the CORES resource library. So what does CORES recognize? CORES is a 5-year certification that applies to a range of service models serving families, seniors, and special populations. It aligns with many PSH or permanent supportive models, but also applies to a broader range of service models. Regardless of the population served, the certification requires an organization to demonstrate that they have a robust level of service infrastructure, which includes dedicated frontline resident services staff in at least a portion of your portfolio, as well as organization-level resident services functions and staff oversight. So why get CORES certified? CORES opens doors. Certified organizations can earn points in state qualified allocation plans in states like Georgia, Maryland, Ohio, New Hampshire, and Virginia. Each state's use of the program differs a little bit depending on their structure and goals, but across the states that have incorporated the certification, the housing finance agencies see CORES as a tool for identifying owners with a demonstrated experience, capacity, and commitment around resident services. Certified organizations can also align with impact investment frameworks, including the Multifamily Impact Council Standards and Multifamily Impact Framework, which is the only common framework of impact investing standards and guidelines designed specifically for the multifamily sector. We've hosted a webinar providing an overview of this alignment to impact investment frameworks, which you can find in our CORES resource library. Not only does CORES align with impact frameworks, but we often see organizations leveraging CORES to unlock new investments and financing opportunities. We're seeing lenders and investors ask whether organizations are CORES certified as part of due diligence. CORES has heard a number of investors and lenders are asking organizations if they're CORES certified or working with a CORES certified provider. We also know that the ways that organizations operationalize their resident services programs takes a wide variety of models. We've tried to simplify this into 3 buckets: the direct model, hybrid model, and third-party model. Both the direct and hybrid models certify owner-operators of resident services. The direct model is for those affordable housing owner-operators that retain direct responsibility for the development, management, delivery, and implementation of resident services coordination infrastructure and staffing. This includes employing both corporate or organizational and frontline resident services staff. The hybrid model is for those owners that contract with an unrelated third-party entity to hire frontline resident services staff, but have developed resident services systems and have leadership that oversee resident services. These owner-operators have corporate or organizational level resident services staff that maintain their standards for services and provide oversight of the on-site resident services coordinators. We often see this model with owner-operators that work with a third-party property management company to then hire frontline resident services staff. We also see this model with owner-operators that may partner with social service organizations to hire their frontline resident services staff. Finally, the third-party model is where owners contract with an external third party to provide all aspects of resident services coordination, including frontline service delivery at the property level, as well as management and oversight at the corporate or regional level. A third-party provider may provide services to one or more owners. The important distinction here is that the third-party provider is the organization achieving CORES certification, not the owner. You'll also see that we also have a streamlined third-party pathway, which includes a streamlined version of the application for organizations who are pursuing certification under direct and third-party models. Please contact CORES for more information on this application. So what does the application look like? The application is approximately 50 questions, regardless of resident services model. These questions can be found on the CORES website along with our scoring rubric. The questions take a variety of formats, including text boxes, drop-down or multiple choice, and required and requested document uploads. Most of the questions deal with your organization's demonstrated processes and approach to resident services coordination at the org level. There are 9 threshold or minimum requirements at initial certification that come from our framework for a system of resident services coordination. And the cost of the 5-year certification is $5,500. Again, that includes the cost for the full 5 years of certification. Here are the 9 CORES threshold requirements. You must have 3 years of experience either as a multifamily housing provider for the direct or hybrid model or as a third-party service provider if you're applying under the third-party model. You must also fit under one of these models and have 3 years of experience providing resident services coordination. You must have resident services staff and services at more than one property, and you must also have strategies for addressing low participation in property services. You should also finally be using these key 4 property level tools or documents: a community scan, resident opportunities and priorities assessment, property services plan, and resident indicators and analysis report. Additional capacities will be required at CORES recertification, and we have a webinar that you can review further to learn more about those requirements. As described on our last slide, you'll need to submit 4 key property level documents. This includes a community scan updated every 6 years, a resident opportunities and priorities assessment updated every 3 years, a property services plan updated every 3 years, and a resident indicators and analysis report updated annually. For your application, all 4 documents should be from the same one property, and at recertification, you'll be required to update all 4 documents at this same property and provide samples for a second property for each of these tools. This slide gives a high-level snapshot of the categories of competencies that we look at in the application. Firstly, we look at organizational structure, showing that resident services is part of an organization's business model and mission in at least a portion of its portfolio. We also look at staffing, that an organization has dedicated resident services staffing at the property level and organizational level, looking at how your org is supporting resident services staff in career development, training, and integration with other organizational functions. We also look at scaled systems. How are organizations leveraging tools, technology, and other platforms to support service delivery and resident engagement? We also look at use of data. how data is used to understand priorities in the community and shape your program design, and how the organization is using data to demonstrate impact. This includes how resident voice and feedback are incorporated. Partnership development is also important. How an organization vets partners, assessing mission and impact alignment, quality and accountability, and codifies these commitments being made with external partners. And finally, funding. How organizations approach their commitments to providing services and how they think about sustainably funding these services. Organizations tell us that CORES helps them formalize internal systems, strengthen partnerships, and improve data-driven decision-making. It's not just about the certification, it's about building capacity and unlocking opportunities for funding and collaboration. CORES organizations are a safer bet, and the certification helps to distinguish an organization as a trusted partner while also recognizing certified orgs as being more intentional in their partnership development and ensuring programs are impactful. For all these reasons, CORES certification can be used to unlock opportunities for partnerships, funding, and financing. So now we're going to walk through the framework in more detail. This is where we tend to have the most questions. These are the steps where an organization is determining when, where, and how to implement resident services. And this is meant to be, again, a systems approach to services. Here's that framework that CORES was built on. We're zooming into the green circles on the left to the steps happening at the organization level. This includes determining goals for outcomes and how resident services is integrated with your mission. You should assess the priorities of the community as well as available resources to determine how to invest in services at a property. This starts with looking at a lot of community-level data. Here are some examples, though this is not an exhaustive list. This is intended to help you obtain a landscape of the community before deeper resident engagement. So how do the CORES questions and requirements map against this? We ask for a number of documents, including an org chart, privacy protocols on resident data, a resident services coordinator job description at the property level, an org's goals, theory of change or logic model, and an example completed community scan. These documents help us understand staff support, the roles and qualifications of staff, training and investment in best practices, your organization's framework for services, and a scan of the community to understand community-level data and assets to inform these services. So here we've moved on to the blue circles that are typically happening at a regional or property level. This is when community data is reviewed alongside property or resident data, and can include resident demographics, direct feedback from residents such as survey results, and data from your program partners. This is how you're using community and property data to develop your resident services plan. From here, you may then collect feedback to understand your program impact. This includes how you're using data to reshape and continue programming and services. Here is how our required documents map against the broader framework. This includes the 4 key tools helping inform your resident services at the property level, including the community scan, resident opportunities and priorities assessment, property services plan, and resident indicators and analysis report. I'm going to talk about these 4 documents in more detail after this slide, but I also want to call out the executed MOU service agreement, which should be executed from the past 3 years and is intended to demonstrate your goals for the partnership, including participation expectations, roles and responsibilities, how you'll share data, and insurance and liability information. In addition to the property-specific resident indicators and analysis report, the Portfolio Impact Analysis Report looks at impact across multiple properties to understand more holistic impact of a specific program, such as an after-school program or broader resident services. When applying to CORES, you're picking one property to highlight in these 4 documents from your existing portfolio. You're demonstrating you've built this capacity, and this is a sample property. First, the community scan, updated every 6 years. Second, the resident opportunities and priorities assessment, updated every 3 years. Third, the property services plan, also updated every 3 years. And lastly, the resident indicators and analysis report, updated annually. If you achieve CORES certification, you'll be required to upload these 4 updated documents again for the same property, as well as an additional sample property 5 years later. That means you'll be uploading these tools for 2 properties at recertification. The first document we're going to talk about is the community scan. In this tool, we want to see 3 things. First, that you're looking for existing local amenities, services, community assets, potential partners, and other resources in the larger community before you implement your own resident services programs. This is frequently initially conducted in the pre-development phase or sometimes a bit later in the development process. However, this scan should be refreshed at least once every 6 years to account for new potential resources in the community. Conducting the community scan should help you discover assets in your area. The scan might include an analysis of options for affordable, healthy food, like food banks or a congregate meal program. Perhaps a local branch of the United Way provides free tax assistance every year. This could be included in your community scan. However, we would like to see more than just a community directory. Another element of the community scan is analyzing the quality of these institutions and partners. For example, communities often have multiple youth programs, but maybe during your analysis of vetting for quality, you discover that the Boys and Girls Club puts on a summer camp program and that it also provides free transportation and shares some of your organizational values. From your analysis, you know that this youth program is likely a great option for your residents. Finally, a community scan must also include local data or community-level demographics. This could include census data, data from your local hospital, school data, and more. Organizations are also required to collect and review community data in their recertification application 5 years after initial certification. There may be many resources of community data you can use, and here are just a few examples. Overall, the information in your community scan should demonstrate that you know what resources and assets already exist and what the gaps are so that you can best serve residents. You are not required to use a particular format with your community scan. However, we want to see that all of the required elements are included. Some organizations create their community scans using Excel, Word documents, or in data systems or directories they use. Others may leverage outside resources like community health assessments or census reports. Some organizations collect information from community leaders and agencies. However, it's important that you make sure the external tools and data sources you leverage are regularly updated or available so that you can reference them in the future when you make updates to your community scan. Again, this document should be updated at least once every 6 years. When assessing the quality of local community resources, we've seen organizations collect feedback from local community leaders and agencies, as well as developing their own rubrics or scoring systems to assign a score for quality. While this is not a requirement, we strongly recommend that applicants assess the quality of the resources in their community. The next document we're going to talk about is the Resident Opportunities and Priorities Assessment. We want to see, number 1, that you're collecting and analyzing demographic data about everyone living at this property, such as race or ethnicity data, income and employment data, and more. Resident demographics help you answer important questions like, am I serving a senior population, school-aged kids, working-aged residents? Are there many parents? Does the group of residents include a large immigrant population? And so on. Part 2 is that you're getting direct feedback from your residents. We want to see what you're asking and how you're asking it, or how the feedback is obtained, documented, and synthesized to understand trends. Perhaps you conducted a resident survey about self-reported personal and resident priorities or desired programming. Maybe you held resident meetings to understand resident perceptions or perspectives better. Feedback from residents can be collected in a variety of ways, and we're not restrictive of how you collect this feedback. However, we want to see that you're thoughtful and intentional about ensuring you have a balanced perspective and aim to seek feedback that is representative of the residents living there. For example, interviewing 1 or 2 resident leaders doesn't necessarily represent the potential wide array of views, perspectives, and priorities of residents. Lastly, we want to see what was learned from the demographic information and resident feedback. If you learned that this property is home to a lot of school-aged children, or that 40% of residents don't have a primary care doctor, we'd like to see that noted here. This evaluation should help you to start considering options to meet resident priorities, like providing an after-school tutoring program or partnering with a community health worker that can connect residents with affordable health providers. Then we have the Property Services Plan. First and foremost, your Property Services Plan should tell us what you have decided to do. What services are going to happen? Maybe you learned from a survey question that 15% of your senior population has taken a fall in the past year, so you decide to offer a fall prevention class. 2. Who provides the services? Another important element to the Property Services Plan is detailing who provides services at the property. Is there a full-time resident services coordinator? If so, is there any other supplemental staffing, such as from regional resident services staff, a community health worker, or after-school program staff? All of the staffing providing services on site should be clearly outlined in your plan. This might also include layering with virtual services, which you should outline here. We also want to see your staffing and partnership model. How many hours of services are provided? What staff deliver on which programs and services? If you have external partners supporting programs, be clear about which partners support your programs and how frequently. Say you found out by conducting a community scan that there is no grocery store within 2 miles of the property, and you also discovered a couple of potential partners. Then in your Resident Opportunities and Priorities assessment, you heard feedback that access to affordable, healthy food is an issue. So you decided to develop formalized partnerships with organizations like Meals on Wheels as part of your Property Services Plan. This is the type of solution we're looking for, and this partnership should be captured and clearly outlined in your plan. What cultural, language, or potential other barriers exist, and how are you planning for these? Perhaps there is a significant immigrant population with low English language proficiency, or some residents are deaf. In that scenario, you maybe could consider hiring bilingual staff or providing an ASL interpreter to bridge communication gaps. Importantly, how are you going to pay for these services? We would like to see that you have a budget included. What resources and sources are you using to pay for staffing and services, whether through property operations, grants, corporate contributions, or something else? Lastly, what do you hope to achieve with this program plan? The Property Services Plan should tell us what your desired goals are and what measures you are going to use to track these goals. Maybe you hope to see increased social connection for seniors, increased housing stability, or improved reading levels for elementary school children. Some organizations track these different elements in different documents and systems. This is fine. For your CORES application, you'll just need to package these documents together into one file and share as your combined Property Services Plan. Other organizations create comprehensive plans that review each of these elements in tandem. For example, you may create a table or spreadsheet that outlines the different programs and services and the aligning staff and funding for each. Again, your Property Services Plan should be updated at least once every 3 years and is intended as your roadmap for services at the property. While we require this tool is updated at least once every 3 years, we do recommend that it's reviewed at least annually in tandem with your budgeting process to ensure alignment. And finally, we're going to talk about the Resident Indicators and Analysis Report. First and foremost, it should align with your Property Services Plan and desired goals that you articulated in your plan, as well as reflect the impact of your programs and services. We want to see how the resident engagement, programs, and services you chose to implement at the property, independently or collectively, added value or had an impact on residents. This document should demonstrate that you're analyzing the impact and show more than just outputs like participation. While it's important to track participation in programs and events, these are outputs, and we're also looking to see if there are changes in resident and property outcomes. For example, if you're tracking attendance at an after-school program, are you also evaluating if reading levels are improving? If you provide community building events, are you seeing changes to social connectedness or tracking residents' perceptions around safety? If you provide fall prevention programming, are there actual reduction in falls? If you provide housing counseling or eviction prevention programming and help connect residents to rental assistance, is there a reduction in evictions? Or if you have a financial capability program where you provide rent reporting for credit building, are you seeing improvements in credit scores? Sometimes your outcomes will be directly related to a program, like reading levels for an after-school program, while other times they may result from a collection of programs, services, and activities, like improved resident safety or satisfaction. Most applicants will demonstrate this in an evaluation and track outcomes over time. The information gathered should track what's working and what's not, and provide some clarity on what services should continue or if any services should be altered to better reach the goals outlined in your property services plan or to align with the changing community priorities. We want to see that you're tracking both outputs like participation as well as outcomes at initial certification. However, organizations can earn CORES certification initially if they've not yet built out their tools for tracking outcomes and are just tracking participation or other outputs. However, you will receive recommendations in your written scoring and will be required to demonstrate you're tracking both outputs and outcomes after 5 years at recertification. So let's put it all together. The community scan, the resident opportunities and priorities assessment, the property services plan, and the resident indicators and analysis report. Together, these documents can support a robust system of resident services coordination. There's no standard template for all these tools, which can sometimes be daunting. We do have lots of examples, however, in the resource library and list the functions of these tools to help you identify what you have to map to these documents. We're looking to see the functions exist, not a tool which has the same name. Your organization might have a couple documents that combine the elements we've discussed. For example, you might have a property survey and demographic report that can be combined to meet the requirements for the resident opportunities and priorities assessment. You may also have elements of two of these tools in one document, such as a community scan and resident opportunities and priorities assessment. This doesn't matter. What is important above all else is that you include all components in your application and make sure it's clear how data in your community scan and resident opportunities and priorities assessment inform your property services plan, and that the outcomes tracked in your resident indicators and analysis report align to your services and programs. We also want to make sure you're clearly labeling and uploading each of the tools in the appropriate place in the application. If there are two tools incorporated in one document, you can upload this document for each tool where it's applicable in the application. This may include uploading the same document for more than one question. If different tools are combined in one file, you should have a clear title for each of the different tools in this one document. You may include a cover page that provides a brief summary of the different tools you've uploaded together to make this clear for the application reviewers. Briefly, here's the scoring for the application. Applicants are scored across sections A through F, and you must meet all threshold requirements. You must also score a minimum number of points in each of the 6 sections. We require you score a minimum of 40 points across the entire application. You'll see that the expectation is that you should be able to pick up additional points than the minimum for each section to meet the minimum overall 40 points. Here's the timeline to apply. First, you'll go to the CORES portal that aligns with your model, whether that's direct, hybrid, or third party, and complete a pre-screen survey. Here, you're self-certifying that you've watched this webinar and meet the eligibility requirements. CORES staff will reach out if we have any questions. Once your pre-screen is approved, you'll be prompted to pay the $5,500 application fee. You'll then be able to work on and submit your full application. 2 staff will then independently review and score your application. This scorecard and analysis is provided to a 3-person peer review committee, which makes the final determination. If your application doesn't require any updates, you'll hear a decision in 6 weeks of submitting your full application. However, if your application does require updates, we will reach out and let you know how to make these updates and resubmit. The 6-week review period restarts from when we receive an updated application. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about any timelines for applications and when you'd like to receive your certification. If approved, you'll receive your certification, which lasts for 5 years, and access to our annual peer convening for other CORES certified organizations. We also want to share there's an appeals process if you have concerns about the decision reached, and more information on that can be found on our website. And finally, while the CORES program was built around and focuses on the certification, we've also built out a suite of different resources for the field. CORES is not built to do robust training, but we recognize a need in the field and an opportunity to leverage resources to support improved practices, alignment, and standards. Several of the resources we do offer broadly to the field include a library that offers a range of different tools, templates, and research, which we add to throughout the year, a quarterly newsletter featuring resources, industry updates, and upcoming events, quarterly webinars that both provide guidance on CORES-related capacities, but also highlight emerging and best practices in the field. We highly recommend accessing the CORES Resource Library for examples of tools developed by CORES-certified organizations and other leaders in the field. For CORES-certified organizations, we also host an annual convening for continued peer learning. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at cores@safenet.org. We look forward to receiving your CORES application.